New Super Mario Brothers is a really hard one for me to analyze because, well, of reasons I think I'll get into, but I have a question first off, which is probably going to make everybody hate me, and that's fine. Some of you may or may not be aware this is one of the most well-selling Mario games ever, and of course it was on the DS, so it gets the DS bump, so that's valid. But it's also just, it's kind of crazy how popular this is. Even when I was going through it, people kept jumping into chat saying, this is my favorite of the 2D Mario games, or I got a few comments on YouTube to similar vibe. So for those of you who really love this game, could you enumerate why to me? Like, what is it about it that really sings to you? Because for me, it was certainly okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it didn't have anything particularly bad. But it also was just kind of there for me. The level design wasn't really all that interesting or engaging compared to a lot of the earlier and later Mario games. They didn't really do much with the controls. The kit was neat. I do like the Mini Mushroom and the Mega Mushroom. That's awesome. But that's kind of all it had going for it. So it was a very mid-game for me. Now, if I can speculate in a vacuum, I think this might be partially why this game sold so well. Because, like it or not, things that tend to be very middle of the road and very safe tend to sell extremely well because a larger audience will find it acceptable enough to buy. I could name some other examples of this, but I'm sure any example I list is going to be contentious. So let's just say I'm sure you can think of a few things, including several movies or films, that would actually qualify for this. So that's my overall opinion. And of course, this is on the DS, so what do you want from me? I also think it had slightly better marketing. One of the problems, I already talked about this from Mario 64 DS, was most people didn't realize it was a proper remake, a complete overhaul of the original game. A huge number of people thought it was a port. Hell, I know people who didn't realize it was something other than a port until I told them that and showed them it on camera, showed them how different the gameplay was from the original N64 version. So a very fun, inventive, interesting game, which actually scored better than this game, actually, overall. But didn't sell nearly as well because this one was listed as New Super Mario Bros. It was in many ways showcased as a reset to the series, and yet it leaned on the nostalgia button really heavily. For the first time, I feel like pointing out, something that most of you are probably aware of is that Nintendo has this thing where they really like to lean on the nostalgia button. No judgment, it's their shtick, and it doesn't bother me as long as it's not egregious. But, for example, how many of you noticed that a lot of the sound effects in this game are straight out of the original NES Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 1, to be very clear. And a lot of the level design is designed in ways that really feel like Super Mario Bros. 1. You know, not doing the really crazy, bonkers kind of stuff they would do in, for example, Mario 3 or Yoshi's Island. Instead doing more vanilla, middle-of-the-road kind of stuff like in Mario 2 or, well, again, Mario 1. I can't even talk about the story axis this time around because they didn't really start leaning into the theming of thing. Like, something I pointed out during Mario 3, I hate to keep praising Mario 3, was how weirdly strong the story axis of Mario 3 was. Like, there was a narrative being presented in the stage orders and in the worlds as you were going through it, and that's cool. World 5 and World 8 being the most obvious examples of that. Although even World 7, as you'd go into different pipe levels, you'd get bits and pieces from all the different other worlds, indicating just how interconnected World 7 was. So there's cool visual stuff and cool storytelling stuff, and that's all gone. And what we're left with is mid. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with being mid. This is something we talked about extensively on stream because it's a really, really common problem, I think. I'm sure you've heard of the meme, right? Oh, we gave it a 7 out of 10, worst game ever. It doesn't really work that way, though, does it? There's nothing wrong with a mid game. There's nothing wrong with a simple, average, enjoyable game, or movie, or show, or book, or meal. I feel like we tend to focus a little bit too much on things having to be the best ever, and I will take ownership of that myself, too, because that's something I tend to fall into the problem of. But I think that we as gamers and we as players, and also them as developers, tend to try to aim for the highest of highs, and we tend to only notice the highs and the lows, and not the overwhelming gap in the middle. So, for what it's worth, if you could actually get a hold of a copy of this game, go for it. It's a perfectly serviceable, enjoyable, and fun game that I can recommend. It's just, you know, not as good as some other games, that's all. And that's all I have to say about that point. I feel like they're trying to rush me off the stage, because apparently this is now the Game Awards, so I'll go ahead and move on to the next game, which I don't remember what it is. I guess we're just going through the new Super Mario Bros. Series right now. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the next one. I'll see you guys.